Hello and welcome to the first event in the Visiting Writers Series of the fall of 2023. First, I'll ask, is the sound okay? Can people in the back hear me? It's all clear. I'm in that stage of recovery where I need to have a mask on, even though I no longer shouldn't be contagious, so don't be afraid about it. So apologies for any lack of clarity in my voice through this. Thank you all for being here. It's really exciting to see so many people coming to hear poetry, and we're really lucky tonight to have a special guest. Hello. Special guests, Noah Zanella and Christy Valentin-Batti, two of our creative writing professors here, so very excited to see you both too. But we have special guest Kate Colby, who will be reading in the second half of tonight's event, and I'll introduce her before her reading. Okay, and then as we get started, one just announcement to please make sure your phones are silenced, and to keep anything that lights up from lighting up during the event. So keep them away so you can listen. Thank you. So welcome to the Visiting Writers Series presented by the English Department at Carthage College, which brings writers from around the country to share their writing and conversation with us here. I'd like to mention two upcoming readings. On October 11th, poet and bookseller and art gallery owner and man of many art worlds, David Abel, will be giving a reading at 6 p.m. in the same space on Wednesday. And on November 8th, we'll celebrate two events: the publication of Chuck Stapleton's new book, 100 Patterns and 3 Heuristics, from Green Gallery Press. Chuck Stapleton teaches creative writing here. He's also going to be doubling as a bookseller. Also, as he works at Woodland Pattern. I'll say more about that. And we're also going to be celebrating Christy Valentin-Batti joining the faculty as a poet and visual artist. She's also here tonight. So the two of them will be reading on November 8th, which will help us recover from the elections. Or celebrate them, whatever is required. Chuck, in his current role as interim bookstore manager at Woodland Pattern in Milwaukee, a nonprofit bookstore and community arts center, has also been kind enough to set up a table to sell books by tonight's readers, allowing you to purchase the books and support Woodland Pattern in the process. So there will be time after the reading to purchase a book. If you want to have your book signed or say hello to one of the writers, you can do that. The other thing to know about the event is we'll have the readings, then there'll be about a 10-minute break where you can say hello or buy a book. And then after that break, my advanced writing class and anybody else who would like to stay will have a conversation about writing and reading and other such things with Kate Colby and our other reader, who I'll now introduce. So the other reader is me, which is sort of embarrassing to introduce myself, but not me, or I said who is also in a way me. He will be reading from his new book, Duration, from Wave Books. And a bit from a companion, a related book that will be published by Wave in spring of 2025. Okay, so now. I'll put on my glasses so that you. I'm excited to read from this book here. Which is called The Duration, and it was written over the last 7 or 8 years, and it was written with all of you who I've ever had in the classroom, with all of you who I've ever taught with all the people that I've read Shakespeare with, or done English plays with, or taken a walk with. Writing doesn't happen alone, and that's a thing that I've learned over and over making this book. And So it has a particular intensity for me to read it here with, okay, you're not in this book if I just had you last year, but in some way the energy of what we've done together will just be in a next book, as I might end up in one of your books. And I think that's part of what I love about being part of a writing community and of writing classrooms. As anybody that's been in one of those classrooms it's different to sit in a room with other people and write. I used to think it was like the strangest way in the world to write something, and now I feel like there's always something there when I sit down with other people. Yeah, thank you. And now I'll read some. I'm going to read sections of the first poem in the book which is called Acting. It's a long poem, and I'm only going to read part of it, but it will still take about 10 minutes. And then I'm going to read one other poem. Acting. She was imitating the great Gatsby, the part where a cloth is billowing on Daisy's arms, by counting the words in each sentence or naming the parts of speech. And what she remembers is not what she wrote, but the sensation of the text billowing and floating inside her, a sound in the knees, a dust mote settling on the blanket, closing the right eye, watching with the left eye marking the pen in its movements. Even as the right eye is open, the neighbor's flickering light and the car going past and the groaning airplane sound for a while. Scott studied how I stood and sat, listened to how I described the symptoms and asked if I'd had abdominal surgery. Yes, 45 years ago. The scar tissues, he said, had bonded to the layers of muscle, and the small pull ever since had contorted the body. We lay on our backs, and as I struggled to say what happened, a large hawk or crow crashes into the boxwood, and a cloud of sparrows exits. A single sparrow, a sharp-shinned hawk, flops out and staggers a few steps toward the house before flying off. Scott explained how we tucked the tailbone after trauma, that I'd never undone this, and suggested I release the 6 parts by imagining the tail we no longer have dropping to the floor. How did that feel? It felt as if it were opening something in me that was closed, and had been closed since I was 4. Yet I couldn't say whether anything had moved. I had tears in my eyes when I left, and since then frequently have had the feeling of being released from a torment I hadn't known was twisting me, since I stood at the center of the sense that the oaks were spinning the first day I could walk again. The almost flat lawn had a steep slope, the fall leaves spiraling and making the sun flash in and out of sight. A feeling of being submerged, of having been written before by those older words, granted a new idea, that being still him, the possibility remains of releasing what had been bound. The tears coming in part at the thought that my body had been left to suffer for decades from this binding, but also by the disorientation that divided or perhaps doubled me. What needs to be accepted right now is the question someone was asking. The train horn blew, an airplane appeared over the bridge, 3 pheasants burst out of the primrose. It's nice to see these things again and again. Look, a mouse. Between the rows of gold rush wrote an a mouth opening sound, a many-voiced, open-throated singing with hundreds, hills, carnival fire, happy people, heathen countryside, forgetting how brief, how compressed, finding full-time joins by negating juridical being, heat in the chest, and outside in the form of, and the game, Ferdyschenko suggests, is everyone say the worst thing that they have ever done. The prince doesn't say, doesn't have a chance to say. And I thought of when I stopped and suddenly lifted James off his bike after soccer practice when he was 6 and shook him, angry and cold after watching the practice. How could he complain about not being allowed to stay in the cold and wet to play on the playground? And he cited this hurt years later when he qualified his statement That Rick is the one who never hit or yelled at him. That you never did, but that one time you did shake me and it was scary. I am very sorry. Stein says, going on was at that time the most profound need I had in connection with writing. Today that is painful. Hardly me, the starling says. Turning to look, it's Rick, walking with his cane, dragging his foot towards the office. A man in a car shouts, "Fucking pussy," as I take a picture of the sky. A fly on my hand, in my ear, John Clare's paragraph addressing the fly as a friend. And I realized I had imagined the last tenth of the book as the whole book. And so hundreds of pages in, I have reached the long-awaited beginning, which also happens to be the moment in the story when it arrives at its composition, the composition of the previous 9/10, the present of the writing of the book. Maybe all books of this genre of the book being written. Though sometimes it is the beginning that begins the experiment, and I'll have to look again to see how it ends. A book in the present in which the whole is contained. Voices in a boot, people on their toes in the boat, Judith overflowing like a pearl. What this means is it rhymes. A leaf floats past underwater, and studying it, I see that the procession of leaves is three-dimensional, embedded in the surface and depth of the river, and the light is green in the river water and yellow at the bottom. The new Fix-It guy who lives in number 3 told me Rick is in the hospital with liver troubles. He was going to come home, but they keep finding new things. Home is number 7. I felt his absence, asked his last name, Abele, so I can see him in the hospital. One of the rules is not to look at things before they happen, and not to see them or write them down before they happen, not to call them into existence by seeing or looking or thinking or writing things before they happen, not so they won't happen, or won't happen more or less or always, before and after, and also in many places at once, but to conceive inside and out, to take in, absorb, catch, to become pregnant with, and by, to produce, generate, contain, hold, to perceive, to catch, to form an idea of, to imagine, devise, undertake, to pronounce, solemnly, to utter, to take, to declare, to express in formal language. A stone-cutting saw has been winding and grinding. The yellow butterfly flaps hard over the maple 80 feet up, then drifts down, because things can be seen from so far off. Creeping thistle scrapes my leg. Tiny purple and yellow asters grow through the banister. White sop from the line drops into the gravel. A child on the swing down there disappears behind a tree and reappears on the other side. The hurricane has passed and the debt collector arrives. I brought a milkweed pod in the house, and someone said it was like the scales of a fish. The seeds folded inside. It was a fish, most fish-like. And we admired the golden spiral and the brown seeds and felt the shiny, glossy, feathery smoothness. Outside, I strewed them on the hood to mark their departure. And as they pulled away, James rolled down the window and shouted, "Mom thinks a milkweed seed is definitely an animal." After I told this story, I made wild motions while saying, "See, a companion approaches." Maggie said yes, the mood that would be lifted by beginning prevented beginning. But beginning with the objects of the mood, phone case was dirty and needed to be cleaned, my room had a funk to it, and maybe I should burn a candle, transform those things into parts of a world. My toe went through the speck of glitter as I descended the stairs. Lying on the floor, words, I thought of picturing while reading a poem, not images in the poem, but a person writing, perhaps in a way or place the poem indicates, with those words somehow having come to that place where a person is writing, another person, a pencil shaving, or a tiny browning blossom, or part of the skin of a peanut, the crumpled edge removed from a page torn from a spiral notebook, crumpled and resting on a thin end and thick end, so the middle is raised off the floor so it seems to be a creature. Lying on the floor, words, perhaps these, had formed and dissolved, formed again, each time replaced by the bodily sensations, a tightness in the skin around the skull, the lips gripping the teeth and releasing them, the sudden slide of a gravel bank on either side of me, landslides that had begun with the trickles of sand grains, then pebbles, and culminated as I stood transfixed in the collapse of a section of the low bank days earlier. The sand in clouds and the pebbles in slow hops were swept by the current toward the lake, my torso in the river's place, and the collapsing banks in the place of my arms. As the pain in my left shoulder intensified, burning and tingling for the duration of not moving, though it is difficult to say, cut off in that way, how much time has passed in any given state, equilateral pyramids extending out in all directions, wave sounds increasing, the moss in the valley of the bark. The first time we watched A Midsummer Night's Dream, Helena and Hermia made out for like 3 seconds, the boy says, walking past. Spencer has arranged the moments of anticipation, intense pleasure, and rest in intervals that follow the golden ratio, Maria said, believing the human body functions in that rhythm, and so will be in harmony with the book. And so the movements of the book are already in the reader, and the movements of the reader are already in the book, and the rhythms of reading become the subject of the book, where the reader learns them and confirms their truth. Whew, it's a workout reading. So now I'm going to read a little bit from this other book called A Companion. And I'm going to read, again, a shorter section from a long poem called An Indefinite and Expanding Time. And I want to tell you, when I read this in Portland, the thing I said about it was that everything in it is true. So I wanted to say that again. I was talking to a couple of people about acting earlier, and my return to acting after getting scared off in college by people doing Brecht I joined a production, all ages production of The Life and Adventures of Nicholas Nickleby at the Young Shakespeare Players in Madison, Wisconsin. And this poem is dedicated to them and to Richard DePrima, who started it. And usually they do Shakespeare, but one other thing they have done is this play that the Royal Shakespeare Company did of Nicholas Nickleby, which takes 9 hours to perform. And it was a cast of 36 people. And because they needed lots of people, they asked for some of the adults to join with the usual younger group of people. And my friend Lisa and I both joined and spent the entire summer, all day, every day at the theater doing this endless and impossible play. I played, I think, 9 characters, and I had to wear wild beards and wigs and speak in all sorts of accents. And it was it's one of the hardest things I've ever done, and one of the most amazing things. And that's part of this story. And another part of it is a class that I had here in which lots of interesting things happened, again, all of which are true, so you'll hear about that. And I also want to, there's some quotations in here which I'm not going to indicate in any exorbitant way. Sometimes they're clear, sometimes they're not. But Bruno Schulz, the great writer, his story, the book, is talked about quite frequently in here. And then there's a little bit of Yeats and some other things. An indefinite and expanding time. Strange circling dots of light were visible through the hackberry branches. After some hesitation, I took the dog to the top of the small bridge to see where 2 low boats in the river mouth carried large letters and electric lights mounted on a frame, EARTH on one boat and ampersand SU on the other. The letters swayed and bobbed with the boats, while on the shore, a person rotated the electric letter N in her hands like a baton. Can this continue to be true? Reading the book by Bruno Schulz, I recall my last reading around a long table in the near dark, where it provided the founding text for a class on the making of small books. The character Signor Bazzo of Milan became Prospero for us as he weighed his conclusions and they dissolved into thin air. But it is we who dissolve, the light in the dark room growing dimmer as one of us reads the auras of the others, and I watch face after face float a few inches forward from the skulls still attached by the necks to the bodies. Another time when I arrive late, the others wait in the dark under the table. The one sits on the floor to the side and leans against the wall, the one who showed the path into the tree but did not follow it. Not to surprise, but to greet me in the configuration of my dreams, demonstrating their willingness to climb, as they had that night, into the pages of the book, which I'm not remembering but encountering in repetition. The dog snores, the snow bounces on the power line, and Daisy, whom I know to be flesh and blood, appears again in the pages as the barrel organ turns. We shall recreate piece by piece what is one and indivisible. I walked out into the falling snow, leaving the whimpering dog behind, knowing I would talk to her and thus be unable to hear the shiver of fear, the presentiment of a thing without name that exceeds all our capacity for wonder, on Morrison Street, just after the Little Free Library, where I stopped to read the titles Baby 411, A Practical Guide to Psychotherapy, Wuthering Heights, and shivered to be in that dark room still with the presence of the people pressing me with the bodiless pressure of something not released completely, as I continued reading, rather hearing, the book in the cadence of faces and bodies not normally in alignment with themselves or this time. I rushed to my room, deeply perturbed with burning cheeks. I began to turn the pages of the old book with trembling fingers. Alas, not many remained. Not a single page of the real text, Schultz writes. The 19th autumn has come upon me since first I made my count. The poem answered in me as the room and its faces, whose names were in the book as songs. I saw it before I had well finished, all suddenly mount in rings around me. There are things that cannot occur with any precision, the book records precisely. When the balanced nerve and the vertiginous ear is severed, the vertigo increases until after 5 or 6 weeks, the healthy ear takes over. The healthy ear hears the pen scratching on the paper, the sweaty palm lifting off the desktop, a third or fourth ear in the distribution of ears across the green land, where the small trees perceived as further away the woodcut, the green buds on the lilac. What will happen to them? It's beginning again. And I, as I listen to the cicadas tintinning in the trees, accept that no sound inside is only there. Each part followed becomes a figure for the whole and takes the others for its parts, as it is taken in turn. Who calls so loud is one way of saying it. Another is, the stage. Another is, dreamed my love did find me dead. Why do you act? Lisa said. It is easier than being myself, Sandy said. And do you find that saying the words, they are your words, and you are being yourself? Yes, it is true, as long as one doesn't prevent it. Robert raises his head, tips and holds it, then drops it into his hands. A goldfinch sits on a sunflower, the plant bows, and the bird curls around so its beak can enter the upside-down seedbed. The actions on the stage and the words of the characters in this play remain in the present. Smike James extends his hand, his fingers curled, the wrist stuck in place so the knuckles touch the chest of Nicholas Seamus, calling for his cue, though the play within the play is over. To whom do you listen? And to whom do you speak? The shadow of his hand falls onto his chest, and all of us previously absorbed in questions of order, of befores and afters, entrances and exits, in the giant ear of the theater, listened to the answer. It was there, the tops of my feet folded below me against the ground. I wanted to love the company, and in the same place, fear, and how this had played out in a loving of those I hadn't thought I loved, and a fear, when tapped on the chest or spoken to, of being unable to respond, of being unlovable, Even as those others, vulnerable or unable, I found I was not ashamed to love inside that which we hadn't fled, thee and me, and who is Sandy and who is Lisa then? The small bees are swarming the sunflowers as I balance on one foot in the house, and the succulent in the clay head vibrates in time with my foot and ankle, a person dispersed in a great broken ring of faces. I cannot say what I mean. The wrong words come alive, and yet they are fine hairs that break the particles into a steady stream I don't need to know. At this angle, the sun divides the green ink up and down the grain, and each stem of each letter includes the range of tones for which I wanted the pen to touch the paper. Hovering, it seemed closer to the book and the faces of the book that also hovered over something so near the words without touching. A hair on the page, a hair from the hand, the green ink goes over it without making a mark or leaving any part out. A wasp descends from the gutter's lip. Some shapes are revealed by the process, some destroyed, some created, some obscured. A beetle is pushed across the page until it falls out of the book. One of the girls in the hammock says, I don't want to go to school tomorrow. And today was so sad. The sun through leaves at 7 p.m. shines on the hammock's green cloth, making of 4 arms and 4 legs, a motion from which their heads are split. What am I? Oh my God, says one of them. I'm carrying in my palm a nest woven out of grass and milkweed floss. The breeze produced by my forward motion lifts it. It floats slowly to the ground. I retrieve it. What is it? A child says, holding the leaf of the tree. The arrows painted on the manhole covers line up. Is the cat looking out the window? Is the dog walking down the street? Max said once, we like to keep stopping and to write things down and talk about them and then go back and watch them again. At this hour on the pedestrian bridge, my hand casts a blue shadow on the pink page, the color of the streetlight and the sky far off. Thank you for being here. Okay. It really is wonderful to meet Kate Colby tonight and to have her here to read, and after the reading and a short break to spend some time in conversation. As I said, Kate Colby's 9 books of poetry include I Mean, Dream of the Trenches, and most recently, I can no longer speak about Reverse Engineer. Reverse Engineer and Dream of the Trenches are both over here, so you can take a look at those afterwards. She's also the author of Unbecoming Behavior. Some years ago, and we're reading that in my class, and we were saying, one's earlier books in the nature of the poetry world, it seems like these days one doesn't often sort of go back in time in some way, so that there's something interesting about that appearing again. It's certainly been wonderful to read it. She has received awards from the Poetry Society of America, Rhode Island State Council for the Arts, and the Woodbury Poetry Room at Harvard. Her poems and essays have appeared recently in the Brooklyn Rail, Conjunction, Spence, Lana Turner, and The Nation. She lives in Providence, where she teaches and works as a copywriter. Reading the poems in Unbecoming Behavior, I got the feeling that the poem is winding itself around. This is a riff on something you said, as you see. I get the feeling that the poem is winding itself around whatever subject offers itself as an armature, including the poet, allowing us to catch sight of it, the poem, in the corner of our ears, in rattling tuk-tuks, trickling sounds of sonic coagulants. It's a beautiful and various sound. Please welcome Kate Colby.
Hi, everyone. Does it sound okay? No? Yeah?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Just yell if you can. Thank you, Rick. It's so nice to be here. And I recently decided to stop trying to keep all my books pristine and to wantonly underline and scrawl all over them. And I've been wantonly underlining Rick's book recently. It's really beautiful. And yes, tonight I brought some old work, some recent work, and some new work. So I don't often do that. It's a nice opportunity. This is Unbecoming Behavior, which I wrote about 15 years ago, or it was published 15 years ago. And I gather many of you are reading it or are going to read it. And I no longer, well, I don't think I ever knew how to describe it. It is in some part about the mid-century American novelist Jane Bowles. And I wanted to write about her because I was visiting Morocco back then in 2002, I think, and was reading her and Paul Bowles' work to prepare for that. And she's so far superior. I was just, it enraged me that he's so well known and she isn't, or wasn't. I think she's getting more well known. And I was also experimenting with autobiographical modes at the time, but I don't know, I decided to just kind of jam them together and, as Rick said, twist me and Jane and all kinds of other things around each other into the poem. So I'm just going to read a little bit from it. It's been a while. And my more recent work is very sort of not minimalist, but very short, condensed poems. And my old work are these long, rangy poems, often with long lines. So it's nice to read them side by side. I'll probably read it wrong though. Mornings grow slowly from the ground up. Pinched off balls of meat are rolling from the bowl. They are meatballs. They are writing postcards, stacks of little thumbing snaps at the lips of public tables. Lick, slap, go the ladies, 3 down, and still they are utterly delightful. Warm light cuts cold triangles from parapets, carpet beat halos, radiating moats, minarets of blue, ululation. You are running like a knife through pats for toasting, exacting breakfasts, where stubborn delicacies still taste like their recipes. I can't go everywhere, be everything. Every day a new balloon. I'm blowing up into bunches. To be xenophobic about one's own history. I meant it then, but look at me now. Puffy sleeves plumped and wry for the revival. Her infinite mantle of curio ships outgrowing their bottles like last-ditch participants in historic love affairs. Sharifa is stacking the dishes. Untouched tea and toast are infuriating, or victims of high-profile disasters. The suffering donkeys, the sound of fronds, the smell of small fires. The heart is never at home, only pushing through so nothing draws a bead on you. A breathing heart beating into the starting line, a tacking pack of red flags wooing the committee vote of inflatable marks, bang, false starts get you, 720 circles jerking around yourself. To latch on like a baby is what it takes to take 2 each time, to nudge around and find a nipple. One later tries to cut the futzing, unless it's where your mouth is. When Jane tries to write, she feels the desert in her mouth, a not unpleasant taste of old parchment and preserved lemon. Her selfish idea of character development only exists in the 4th dimension. Slices of life circle like bored wagon wheels. They fall in tinny crescendos, something like a rabbit's death scream, something like candied peels or reception sticks, old-fashioned confections whose subtlety does not suit contemporary life. Right through it goes the old line, stick it out, as though a life were a weak filament, shedding nothing over anything, but necessary to keep buzzing anyway. A stale motel room with a slippery synthetic coverlet. The rangy 19-year-old handyman who only got his pants half off before the show was over. Back at the ranch, the dudes with new boots and feet up in front of the lodge, chops locked in reflexive drawl. The horse doctor was kicked in the jaw, displaced it by 4 inches. We are both afraid of horses, for one thing, we who squeeze our knees against jerks. Seeing myself in the corner of my eye, harp tucked in the crook of my arm, crown digging into temples. I am beauty incarnate, as frozen in stone-cold parish hall, cutis erectus in the footlights. Gobo hearts rotate. Creaky chairs reclaim their folds, this false attribution of feeling. Your prepossessed hearts being won by the dozen, please take me for my body double in dreams I understudy others' eyes. Dear Jane, would that I could see you. Plan C must consume ourselves with ourselves. But Jane can't stand still like that, instead milks her hard-won Jolie lead for going feathers for a fright wig. A practiced natural, sideshow shoo-in, squandered prodigy, or idiot savant. Exactingly prodigal, unsparing with cold cream, we are nature morte, tableau vivant. Now I'm going to read a little from Reverse Engineer, which just came out last year. I'm hoping I don't lose my voice. I tend to do that. All right. Dupe. 2 precepts of artificial intelligence on television. Never show a computer its code, and the more a robot understands, the less likely it is to know it's not real. I am nothing if not aware the self is made the shape that explains it. The purpose of living is to keep alive what I should know, I should know. Ars Poetica. Herein, the question of what a poem is more important than what it says. That said, no poem ever fails to extemporize its reason for being what is essentially itself. Trees smear train window, more immediate forehead grease. What I write about the everyday is not my experience of the everyday. A vestigial armrest ashtray. A genome isn't made of letters. This is hard to remember. Narrows, shallows, knee pockets, sockets I can't see the back of. My body is half a map and the rest is history. What I can't know beyond recollection, I put into words to see how it seems. Night vision. Shadows are ideas of what casts them. The moon is there to match, but only on one side. Stars pick through leaves. A tree-shaped black space swallows itself. If I could disgorge my heart like a starfish's stomach, I'd draw you in. But I only have this head, and how I love you looks more like me than I do. Airlock. Form is what we share the world with, a wave that doesn't take the water with it. Only you contain me like a sieve sorts the sea. We hold our heads in each other's hands, found our air Atlantis, the key to which breaks the lock by breaking in it. Reverse engineer. The measure of offense is its definition. Of my mind, its mark in the mouth, mirroring alluvial fans of my face. What kind of a document is a photo of a map? Whether I've seen a thing whose word I'm unsure of, say a pergola, it's practically certain, but I've never put oblivion in a poem before. All this time, I didn't even notice. Took almost forever, pretty much everything. The pickets are listing what I am used to being broken. Centaur. 1. Is a wave made more of motion or matter? Is the answer half of each? That seems too exact. One rule of science is it works the same everywhere, except for the words in which it's conceived. In other words, half a glass is complete. 2. A boy pulls legs off a daddy long legs, shuddering black dot stripped of its name, which won't regenerate. The universe is heavier than what we know is in it. There's no proof of Nietzsche having hugged a horse, for instance. 3. Let's go means either toward or away, or uncontracted releases, which is just between. Language, some believe, is here to make us think. Silence can't exist without a word for it. Live it. A poem makes much of what's already in it. Essentially means deeply or all but. As swamp gas accounts for visual phenomena pertinent to the impossible, words are fake in fact of night, their light the stars won't reach to meet. Leave off can mean stop or omit. A unicorn's an animal, a tricorn a hat. The beginning of a corner is as long as you face into it. Just gonna grab my water. All right. Last, I'm going to read some more short-ish poems in the same vein from a new manuscript called Viewers at Home. And some of these are coming out as a chapbook next year from Factory Hollow Press. Antediluvian. I might be a slight woman, but rhetorical Methuselah, run-on face and pronounced mouth. In the teeth of all data, I am lashed to the mast, awake at the crack of ruin. Light heaves west while I write from the middle. The ocean isn't finished. My head is a pincushion of holes with pins in it. "50 First Dates." Does anyone know this movie? 50 First Dates. I woke up like this, morning on my mind, thought not a thing unto itself. If I could move around inside instead of being hogtied to my head, I'd be a sight to draw a bead on. Cracked grass, crazed asphalt, half-staff morning glories in the rain. A pole full of flyers with the tabs ripped off. A plein air, pointillist cave painting. Non-onomatopoeic. Word is the word for a word, the word for which is autology. And the one for one that looks or tastes like what it means, looks good enough to speak. Jolie led is pretty ugly in English, opposite in French. We don't yet know how long a bang can go, only that it created what, without which it was silent. Now there's a reason to go back and read your old work. That is probably the only 2 times I've used the phrase Jolie led in poems. I didn't know, I didn't mean to do it. Product research. This poem has been pre-populated with the C for ease of access, like GIFs on TV, lids wrapped separately. Just what I asked for. A ready-made estuary, dun grebes, gold reeds, the sound slopping up against it. My next poem will be of the heat-sealed variety, difficult to crack, other than with sharp shears trapped in the same packaging. I approached the actual ocean once, was turned away, back to this widget with which the words for it are made. Freak out at the Container Store. This set of sets only nests when it's empty of anything other than self-same contents. 3/4 of infinity is words. Events don't happen in time, they make it, as meaning occasions the medium it needs to survive what is the case of lucite I see inside. The timeline was invented in 1765. Man alive. What we see is not the object. Frescoes peel away from plaster. Pigment falls and holy raiment wanders off like a wraith returned to the artist's intention. Ben-Hur is there to watch the crucifixion, but dead can mean completely, as in reckoned, set, or right. Perfection is a sort of life. Even chickens after the rain take all the color of light. A diamond is forever. I saw an ad for gemstones made from remains, the carbon extracted from hair or ashes. As we are only tenants in our elemental arrangements, a tube of refrigerated biscuits with endless uses, what are we supposed to achieve by keeping our atoms from the grave? Better to wrap you in words, love, a tinned weenie to have as long as it lasts. A heart leaves the head what's left. We might be consumed by heat, but heat death is the thing to go after. Theory of anything. They found a burning bush in an acceptable desert, only it's not a tree, but a cave that glows when the sun is low. Your eyes do conceive you, delivered people. We are chained down in the mouth, inside out flames. Just as promised, a land is made in our likeness. A man has stars in his knees and oxen hitched to the earth's axis, which is how we turn. Where there's an axis, there's an origin of 0 coordinates, but not the same as nothing. Geometry is wanting. Easter eggs. If our world is a simulation made by a higher order of being, what did they embed for their own entertainment? Sinkholes, axolotls, dreams. That turkey is Peru in Portuguese. Sometimes there's a secret room. My daughter is one, I think. She is infinitely regressive. Every night she says, I love you even more until I stop saying it back. The idea that we are not our own is as old as words allow us to think it. Pixelated light on the river at night must be the maker's backwards anachronism. Gem. As a metaphor takes care of a relation, you can't measure a phenomenon with a tool it acts upon. Exactly only means with inexactness, unlike wind and wound, which the sound will pick for you. Flying by winterized islands of dormers, cormorants crowd onto nautical garbage. Trees lean into November's embers, oh, you forever burning down the whole house to find the diamond. Last one. Situation. I've flung these poems too far to return from, between, meaning together not at half their distance, words and me, a wave ceases to be at some length. Water is not wet, only that which touches it. I learned in the lurch of inertia before the train starts moving. Most things are illusory, but not everything. It's all here. Took millions of years for man to arrive at this poem about what's lost forever from my temporary hand. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much. That was beautiful. So now we'll have a break for about 10 minutes where you can come and see the books, say hello to the poets, and then everybody who's in my advanced writing class will stay, and anybody else that would like to stay for conversation is welcome. But if you're in the class, please do. And thank you all so much for listening and being here.